Dr. Simpson really helped to shape our academy. Conversations with her early in the course of our academy construction, I think kind of set us in the right direction as a unique teaching academy situated within a network of academic community hospitals, which is a rare challenge and opportunity, I think, that we've had the opportunity to engage with. So we've welcomed her back. She was telling us she doesn't often do this because she's, I think, so senior in her career and has I'm sure given so many of these talks through the years, but we're super, super grateful to have her address us today. I actually wanted to introduce Beth because I know Beth has forged a special relationship with Dr. Simpson as well to give the formal introduction. So a little bit more hoopla before we start.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Robin. Yes, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Deborah Deb Simpson, who is Academic Affairs Education Director for Advocate Aurora Health, a not-for-profit healthcare system whose physicians provide education to medical students, residents, fellows, and other health professions. She's an adjunct clinical professor in family medicine at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health, and at the Medical College of Wisconsin. She's also deputy editor for the Journal of Graduate Medical Education, a member of the Alliance of Independent Academic Medical Centers Board of Directors as well. So we're very pleased to have Dr. Deb Simpson join us today. Thank you for being here. I did want to just make a quick announcement that we are recording this session. This is just for our internal purposes as a resource for New Vance Health. So if folks are not comfortable being recorded, we ask you to please exit now and you can catch the recording later. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Deb, so we can add your slides. And welcome to those who are just joining us. We'll be starting in just a moment. Perfect. I see your slides.
Great. That looks awesome. I am so excited for you all. I don't know if you are the only, but you're clearly among the first academies at academic medical centers, integrated healthcare systems that are not owned or operated by a university. So congratulations. You all have made this happen. So that I am honored and humbled to be one of your speakers. And as I said, I don't do it too much. It isn't because I'm too senior. It's because every time I give a talk, probably like you all, I rework it and spend way too much time on it and try and get it to be better. So it's really an issue of time, but wanting to support folks like you, which, by the way, the Alliance of Independent Academic Medical Centers is a great organization for people who are not owned or operated by a university. So it's got annual meetings and presentations and all kinds of fun things. So it's been a great way to connect with people who share the same context, because it's very different if you're a teacher or faculty and your paycheck comes from a medical school or a university. So that said, so the thought today, given you all are leading the way in terms of an academy at a healthcare system, is what really are the jobs of medical educators, and wanted to take you on a journey to 2025 and actually maybe even to infinity and beyond. Because I think we, as educators, we need to not think about where we are now, which is how we daily work, but what are we designing and who are we preparing people for and what roles and jobs. So the question always is, oh, can you predict the future? And uh, Raymond is like shaking his head. I don't know. Maybe, sort of. Who knows? So I hope to give you a thought that yes, you can. Actually, if you think about it in a slightly different way, and to give you the skill set to think about that by using a concept called hard trends in education and medicine. and using that to help frame going forward, and then explain to you how we've done that to help us think. And then how a journey that took us to creating what is the job of the physician, what is then the job of the medical educator, and then how do we develop educators for the future and when they're still trying to keep their head above water on a daily basis. So some people may perceive it as a conflict of interest. I am paid a day a week by the Journal of Graduate Medical Education for one of the deputy editors. One of my major roles is I am responsible for the rip-outs, which are front to back, two-page. When the journal used to be in print copy that you could literally rip it out. It's like academic medicine's back page. They're meant to be practical and active. And I always tell people that I am a Green Bay Packer shareholder because I'm supposed to disclose that. I'm one of those that can't say ill about any other team, sport, owner, apparently. Do I have a vote? Yes. Do I have a say? No. So that said, so let me tell you about the plan for today. It's a journey, and the background on thinking is, as I mentioned, hard trends, going through what was happening in medicine and medical education, and then looking at the job roles as a framing concept that comes from Clayton Christensen's work and some others who say design with the end in mind. So we did that with future, which some physicians, geriatricians, some in medical education, and then thinking forward for faculty development. So what I want to do is highlight some of those job roles and skills. And then we've done some other work with what do we think is happening with graduate medical education in 2030, because we all are an independent sponsoring institution, probably like you are, where you have to think about where we're going. And then hopefully a little Q&D that I hope is actually dialogue. But feel free if you have questions, comments. Beth is going to monitor the chat. But if you're not getting something or want to challenge or dialogue, feel free to just turn your speaker on and chime in. So with that, little background, I'm one of those people that came from, I'm an educational psychologist by training, cognition, learning, some assessment evaluation, have worked my whole career in medical education. And I worked at a medical school for a number of years at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and was one of those associate dean kind of people that was responsible for assessment and evaluation and all that stuff. So faculty knew me, students, when they found out what I did, were always, "Ugh, why do you do that?" or residents. But got an opportunity to switch and work with some colleagues who had moved over to a healthcare system that at the time, this is when we were just Aurora, and we've since merged with a Advocate that's in Chicago. We trained over 4,400 health profession trainees came through our doors. And the phenomena of how important healthcare systems are to the clinical education of our future workforce goes so unnoticed. And so that was exciting. They also had big data for me, that you could link education to clinical outcomes, all kinds of fun stuff. So it gave also an opportunity to rethink what medical education's job focus was and what we needed physicians. So this was in 2012. What was their job? Because we figured that's where our graduates would be out in practice, and what would we be preparing them for? I think for me, what's really important is thinking through, sorry, is thinking through what we could do downstream, what was going to happen downstream, and letting our faculty and our learners know. So again, put yourself back in 2012. Some of you may have been still in training, not even, you were born then, but otherwise. So started to do a fair amount of reading. My boss at the time was very supportive, because I don't know if you kept up on the lid at that time. There were 100 different groups who'd put out recommendations about This needs to be in the curriculum. This needs to be the education. It's like, yeah, everybody wants a piece of the pie, but nobody wants to give anything up. So thinking about it from the end in mind, which is what Frank and Chen and all these in Lancet talked about, is what do we want our graduates to be able to do? Now you might say it's competency-based education, but are those competencies, one, preparing for the future? And as I mentioned, Clayton Christensen was informative. I don't know if you know him as probably the innovator's dilemma, but he also wrote about the disruptive classroom, the innovation university, competing against luck, which is based on what are the jobs to be done. And that's where we got the idea of the job roles. So again, we read and thought about the future. And then, so the question really is, why is your windshield so much bigger than your rear view mirror? That's a kind of a mindset if you're thinking about the future. And the reason is, some would argue, and we had a chance to meet with Daniel Burris, who is a high school physics teacher in greater Milwaukee, and then started getting more into looking at future and has now got his own business. It's the rearview mirror is small because you're looking backwards. And it's much more important to see what's in front of you. And if we look at things in the right way, you can see the future. You can get darn close. So let me take you on some of his fundamental concepts that we've used. He uses this role idea of soft trends, hard trends. He's got variations. But a hard trend is something that will happen with certainty. You know what's going to occur. Soft trends may happen. Something may influence it, something may change. Anyone think about a hard trend in medicine or medical education? Anything in the chat or?
Nothing in the chat, but feel free to type in your answer or just to unmute and share. Oh, I see Mary is typing something.
Well, let me get you started while we're waiting. Is this a hard trend or a soft trend? Population is getting older. Hard trend? Okay, yep. That's something we're not going to change. We might change by changing birth rates, but the population is still going to change. Any others that come to mind? And what does that mean for medicine? And everybody's talked about it in the gray tsunami and everything else, and costs for healthcare.
Deb, there was a comment from Mary Shaw that says you have to know certain things, anatomy, etc.
I don't know. Burris would probably consider that a soft trend. You know, back when you all were in medical school or whatever, you probably all did anatomy dissection on a cadaver. How much do you need to know? If you're a psychiatrist, do you need to know all of the same versus a surgeon or a primary care? I don't know. Has to be with certainty though. One of the things that was a hard trend was virtual visits. Remember, this was in 2016. And by 40% of all healthcare would be virtual by 2030. In 2016, half of Kaiser Permanente's visits were virtual. Increased consumerism, patient is a decision maker, 24/7 access, price and performance transparency. I don't know about you, but we have now since then had to put up price data, for physician performance data and their experience, all that. And they want care anywhere. They don't want to go far. They want you to come to them. Do you think tech is going to increase or decrease? Increase. Hard trend. Big data. People looking at all that stuff that's sitting on digital repositories. Increase. What about the Internet of Everything? You know, electronic health records, wearable tech, increase, decrease, increase, right? Remote patient monitoring. There was Apple had a home kit at the time. There was a study in geriatrics because they were worried about discharging patients from the hospital and then readmission rates. They hardwired, connected everything from their sleeping to their toilet, to their fridge, to their med refills. They could identify for 100 patients, they could identify before those patients were at risk and readmitted an intervention. And they more than paid for connecting and hardwiring the patients. This was in 2016. Is machine learning going to increase? Decrease. Prognostic algorithms giving you guidance. Interpretations of difficult, yeah, it's going to just keep going up. It already has. And value, not volume, incentivized. Things like preventive geriatrics, personalized precision medicine, population medicine. Think about the, I'm thinking the gourmet, but that's not what it's called. Concierge services. They have been dramatically increasing where physicians go out with other healthcare team members because they want the value, not just to be a number. Now that's only for a select few, but over time, the value gets, you can debate it. What about obesity rates in the US? Is that going to go up or down? By the way, unfortunately, you're in the same color, um, or you're a little better than Wisconsin, so stay there, by the way. It's going to go up. Is it a hard trend? So when you do just what Robin's doing or Raymond is doing, yeah, it's a soft trend versus, there's going to be more tech. There's going to be more data. So he says it, it may go up. It's something we could figure out. Will we? Who knows? So those are just changing times. Healthcare is changing. The science has changed. There's going to be more science discoveries. There's going to be more genetics, right? Patients as consumers, big data, machine learning, regulations. I didn't ask you about that, but are you going to have more or less? More. So looking forward, what does that mean for the education of the job roles of our physicians if we know this is happening in medicine? This was a while ago. So in 2013, we invited 52 healthcare system leaders, medical school deans, education leaders from across the country this question. And by the way, 50 of them were happy to talk to us. We couldn't make the schedules work, which was amazing. We were like, because we're nobody, we just asked and sent emails. You're hiring a physician in 2020, but you have to write a job description first. What are the most critical job roles and responsibilities that your candidate must demonstrate? Guesses? Oh, I have to tell you, there was no disagreement when we did the qualitative analysis. It was pretty amazing. We were astonished. Ability
We
to
have in
listen.
the chat,
Yeah.
ability to listen.
Anything else? Communication.
Empathy,
Okay.
does that fall under communication? Not sure.
Yeah. Lumper splitters. We were trying to look for big things. But that ability to communicate with individuals, with patients, with teams, probably, right? Families. So this is what we found. By the way, Andy Anderson is now over in your neighborhood. He's in New Jersey leading one of the healthcare systems, and this is part of it. So a proactive obviously clinical competent, but not just patients, but to think about populations, high ethical standards, skilled at leading, but also serving on teams. And this is for physicians, because I know your academy is interprofessional. You know, a social worker may be the best person to lead the discharge team discussion, or home care discussion, may be best as a nurse practitioner. So you have to have both abilities. You are spot on with our leaders, communicate superbly with professionalism, digitally data and technology. You forgot about all the big data coming. This was at a time when we were still adopting integrated healthcare systems, electronic health records, all of that. And we had our more senior physicians going, don't need that, don't need that. But that's now a given. We knew that was happening. But now you also have to be able to use data and disease registries, data dashboards. It's not that you're going to gather that data, you're going to have to use that data to inform your patient and population care. And you're going to have to engage in rapid cycle improvements, QI, PDSAs, whatever you want to call it. You also were going to have to be agile, adaptable, and innovation driven, particularly as healthcare, because we know physicians' roles are changing, professions change, responsibilities. There's a notion that primary care people over time will be supervising a team of APCs and have, just like psychiatry does, because there's not enough, and deal with difficult, and committed to lifelong learning and self-care. This was all pre-ACGME and everybody calling it well-being. But you had to figure out how to keep yourself, your team, and everyone else healthy and present. We were astonished. And these, again, so this wasn't debatable. And most people go, yeah, I think so. But we just told them about the hard trends. And then they were, yep. We interestingly did the same thing at a large geriatric meeting that had over 115 geriatric educators, clinicians from all over the US, because it happened to be a grant meeting that we were all at. And we said, what's the job of the geriatrician going to be? A complexivist. Geriatricians don't care for well-aging adults. That's going to be primary care, internal medicine, OB, if depending on women, right? They're going to be a consultant. And I can give you an example that occurred shortly after this. Our healthcare system has a data dashboard for all of the patients who are in over 65 in our hospitals. Our geriatricians are assigned to look at that dashboard and provide consultation to the clinicians actually on spot, caring for those patients and saying, gosh, these metrics that we're seeing look a little off. What are you thinking? So they provide a consultant service, but they initiate it. They don't wait based on the data dashboard. Remember that big data thing? Health system leaders and innovators. Who's the biggest consumer of healthcare and resources? Older adults. Remember that piece coming forward? Number of VAs and their CMOs are actually geriatricians, interestingly. And then the functional preventionist, keeping not older adults well, but functioning. ADLs, IDLs, all of those things. And then they were going to be the educators for big G, geriatricians, creating more, but creating how many times do you invite a geriatrician into your program to talk about geriatrics? Or geriatric emergency medicine is another national movement that's happening. So this is all looking out that front window. So that's the job roles. But what does that mean for us in medical education? And here were the hard trends. More and more is going to be outsourced. Technology, big data, learning analytics, and the learner as consumer co-designer. So let me give you some examples of these hard trends. This was AAMC partnered with the Khan Academy. We haven't heard as much about them, but they were so huge. That's who completed and they outsourced the development of that to Khan Academy because they were better at it than the AAMC and the MCAT prep. Data warehouses. If you're not keep track of your colleagues down in New York at NYU, they have a huge educational data warehouse. They track from medical students through residency to out in continuing education and can do predictive analytics and tell you where someone and what time they went to medical school and based on gaps in their care because they combine it with other metrics out in clinical practice. In 2017, this was kind of a hot new topic, learning analytics. If you today Google degrees or certifications, everybody's got one. A master's degree from Brand. I just picked some that were kind of on in your area. There are also a number, some of them are online. That wasn't even a field, and now it is. So given some of those, and I don't want to go through them, outsourcing, I'll give you another example. At that point in time, surgery residency programs had combined and created a common core curriculum that people could download. Professional societies were creating programs for faculty development and teacher development that you could download as part of your membership. So outsourcing. Textbooks. We don't use textbooks so much anymore. Vendors of textbooks and publishers were seeing this as a new spot, and they have the resources and the bandwidth to create it. So if those are the hard trends, those predictable things, and we know looking back now, it's happening. What does that mean for the role of the teachers, of our educators and our healthcare systems and medical schools? And so we asked that question and said, what's the job roles going to be of the medical educator in 2025? So we happened to do a AAMC session on it, got it accepted. We had about 100 people in the room. And again, just like when we interviewed people, we broke them into facilitated small groups and out it came. 6 common job roles for medical educators based on hard trend. The hard trend is that big data, education, predictive analytics. By the way, if you were at Arizona State and you were a first-year student at that time, they knew within 3 weeks of whether you were at risk. Why was that so important? Because they kept all the tracking trails on for everybody in their online programs. Because more than half of their enrolled freshmen were dropping out because they weren't doing well. Over 2/3 of them at that time were first-year college students. So this wasn't new at that time. Was new to medical education. We have a ton of data and now integrated with the electronic health record. It's a matter of tracking. Identify performance gaps because that's what you want. You don't want the educators to spend time. You want learning analytics people to give you that dashboard so you can identify gaps in the individuals and groups learner performance. That's part of what we need our educators to do. And then you all have mentoring or advising programs. Give that data to those folks and then think about time variable competency-based medical education and assessment. That trend continues thanks to milestones, right? So the diagnostic assessor is the person that can look at that data set and work at a group and an individual level to guide actions. So that's the first one. I'll walk through these a little more quickly to give you a sense. The other is a content curator. Remember I told you that the publishers are going to do a lot more and consult, and they already have bought out people's time who are expert clinicians. They do that for their books. They're just using those people now to do curriculum. High quality educational content is available and will continue to increase from professional organization and publishers. The job, though, is to access, select, and sequence that appropriately for your mission, your values, the populations you serve. So you've got to do that identification selective selection, but you've also got to build alliances across stakeholders, internal or external. You know, if you're in medical school, you use all those cases that are common that people use, building those and framing your own. So that's a skill set for the curator. Does that need to be everyone? No. And one of the things about this is that not everyone is going to have the same roles. Technology early adopter, ah, you know, nope, I can't do a user design interface. Oh, then you're hired. That isn't the case anymore. The exponential growth. And again, we need people not to just wait for technology, but to be able to access it, select it, sequence it. Not all of us, but some of us need to be really good at that. And that's what the skills are: using and accessing the approach to technology, and then also recommend when your use of tech isn't the right solution. I don't know how many of your projects in the academy are, I want to use tech to do this. Is that the right solution for the issue they're facing? But also knowing what to do when tech fails and solve it versus wait for IT that, at least at our place, um, by the time you would finish that, your talk and the day and the week might be over because we don't have our own tech. Oh, and then in the middle of all this, as we were thinking through this, COVID arrived. So think about your 2020 educator roles: diagnostic assessor, content curator. The number of national professional societies that started doing shared lectures over, right? If you were an OBGYN, you could log on and get a lecture on X at noon at a particular time. Tech adopters, we all got better, had to. We had to negotiate, argue with our systems about what to turn. Beth and I were just talking about that, what to turn on, what to turn off in the platforms they would let us use. We all became learner-centered navigators. We didn't have as much big data, but we did have data that we could use: clinical competency committee data, milestone data, use those to achieve performance target, and coaching skills. So you're going to navigate and help your learners curate and resources and facilitate one-on-one in groups. Always, this is the one that everyone, if you're a clinician, has to be as a role model. The things that are the job role. You have to be the people that talk about QI. You have to be the people that talk about science and help people integrate, and patients. And you have to model that. Clinical care, interprofessional team, leader and member, rounding with other professions, humanism, system, quality improvement, patient safety thinking. And then everybody wants to design their own course, their own curriculum. That's these days a pretty complicated task. That's going to be some people's roles, not everybody's roles, because you have to think about not just the home space, the face-to-face space, but you have to think about the virtual space and all the other resources and augmented reality and simulations and interprofessional, and whether you do it as a group or you do it as one-on-one. That's a pretty sophisticated skill set. Hopefully that's what keeps people like Beth and I employed for a while. But it's not only that, because there are a ton of clinicians who are doing master's and other graduate degrees in medical education, your own academy. What are you grooming them for? Decide what roles they should be playing. And maybe some of them are going to be the engineers or architects. But they have to know the sciences underlying learning and some of the implementation sciences in order to be effective. So I've taken you kind of on a whirlwind: drivers, hard trends, technology, information explosion, technology regulation, diagnostic assessor, disruptive innovations. It's been kind of a journey to 2025. Most people said, uh, some of the leading thinkers, the future of medical education is now with COVID. how it have transformed our medical education. And then I don't know about you, but for us, all of the issues around um, race, ethnicity, all the is LGBTQ, all of that, indigenous people, disabled, all of that has also added on top of the mess that is and it was and still is COVID. Because I don't know about your faculty, but our clinicians, their gas tanks are still at zero. They have not recovered their energy. Very hard. Some recent studies, by the way, that say if you were committed to teaching and were able to balance that and make it work, you are doing your well-being is a little better. But think about these job roles and either raise your hand or a note with a number in the chat. If you adopted this role during COVID-19 or DE&I, where you had to use data to figure out what to do with learners because you weren't giving them the same jobs anymore. Some of them, particularly our residents, got moved other places, and faculty. Contact Curator. Did you have to find things in a big way in a huge time? Everyone had to be a tech adopter. Did you have to do some coaching and navigating for your learners during all this? Standing up and being a role model. Absolutely. But who designed? Did everyone create the new learning environments or was it selected roles? So put that in the chat or just shout out. So I'm arguing that everyone was a 3 for sure and a 5 for sure. If you were a clinician, you kind of had to be. But what about these others? Not everyone did 6. Agreed. Or 1. Yep. And some of us didn't do 1. In our system, a lot of that fell to the program directors and APDs and coordinators to help pull all of that together. You didn't use that because people had no time to do the advising in the same way. I just so it really pushed us. And, if you are one of those that thinks about change as an opportunity as well as a challenge, it really pushed our job roles forward. So what does that mean and how do we help each other become really good clinician educators for the future? And it's a concern and none of us want to be incompetent. But if people were clear and committed, everybody's smart as clinicians and educators. We've all learned new skills. We can do that. But it might take a mind shift, a little bit different thinking of what our roles are as educators. Because we still have a number of people that say, my job is to be a really great clinician and teach content. I don't need to pay attention to how well my residents are. I don't need big data. I know when they're in trouble. I know when they're good. It's a bit of a mind shift for some. And then you add in the justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and all of that. And again, is that my job, not my job? Those are mind shifts. We have had grand rounds where we have some of our clinicians advising us that race is still the #1 thing they ought to be using in their clinical diagnostics. And these are not people who are in those kind of specialties, because race is a surrogate. It's a socially constructed. Genetics, yes. So we have more education and mind shifting to do. But again, pre-COVID, we were still thinking about how do we help people become and do a needs assessment, if you will, of where we needed to do some faculty development. And we had 170 people in a huge room at the AAMC. We had 28 breakouts, table facilitators. We gave them the job roles and said, report out 3 key findings. So these are our facilitators doing the report outs. Amazing. #1 strategy is to use each other, Do not bring in outside people, gurus like me. Use the peers in your systems, or not so guru, sorry, but use the people you have who have this expertise. If you don't have it, find it. It may be in your healthcare system, or it may be where then you need to bring someone on. But that was fascinating. Why? Because they are more likely to do the mind shift. If I can see that Raymond has all of a sudden become a wizard at this and adopted that, he is more likely to convince me that I, as a clinician, might need to try it. Or if Robin is in this area, it is that mental health, that people who do what I do, and they can frame and support any kind of role change is not a new role. It's just an evolution. As one of our folks said, I went to medical school when everything was a mimeograph. Or I listened to slide tapes with a carousel in the library and slides that dropped in. We've all evolved. So emphasize it as an evolution, and that it's really a sustaining and expanding the identity you have as an educator already, your values and purposes. Attend to these transitions though, because it is this purpose and identity, and help people realize this is not a fad. This is not something that's just going to go away, but it's actually something that's going to help you get even better at what you care about. But not all the roles. Teach from a growth mindset. We all make mistakes, but it's how you're going to get better and achieve your purpose. And then this is part of why the Academy and you all are so exciting. You have visible organizational and leadership support for faculty development. Because if it's a sidebar, if it's a do it at 8 at night, if there's no time for it, then it's not a priority. We all know that. So I just want to give you a quick sense of some of the strategies we used for both COVID and because adoption. So think about that. It's an evolutionary role, because we know the challenge is people don't want to look incompetent. They have limited expertise. Just say, we're in this together and we're going to tap each other's expertise. And that's how we did it. With the challenges, we know we need knowledge. What do I know about race-based labs and medications? Ugh. We created a DEI blueprint and framed it as a milestone using the ACGME and systems-based practice. There's a big call that systems-based practice milestone focuses within the healthcare system. It doesn't prepare us, so we created our own. And that served as a blueprint and a needs assessment. And they're like, I need to know it before I can teach it. Remember that co-production of learning? A lot of our learners know way more about genetics, diversity, inclusion, race-based care than we do. There's this fear, though, that you don't want to look incompetent. You don't want to make it worse. Focus on values. That co-production fail forward. Clearly during COVID, a lot of residents, a lot of medical students had really valuable roles in our healthcare system. Our residents in 2 of our specialties created protocols because they were the ones on the floor all the time for workflows for COVID patients that were adopted by their hospitals. Co-production. They had faculty provide input, obviously. Growth mindset. Accept that things are not going to change, fit within the organization. There are some people that just don't want this role. Okay. Baseline data. Embed within existing forums. Don't ask people to come to new things. And our president in DAO and recognition. We had an educated podcast where our chief medical officer, our chief financial officer, our chief, all the C-suites, I can't remember them all, but also the president spoke about how valuable it was, and we would recognize that. Have they actually changed some dollars? Somewhat. but you need that. So in GME, we did the same kind of thing. We got thought leaders. We asked them 3 questions. What was the most significant transformation in GME over the last decade? We did this as part of the Journal of Graduate Medical Education because we were celebrating our 10th year anniversary. And we said, what's GME going to look like in 2030? So we used the same approach. We did interviews. So if you were to say, what's the most significant transformation in GME that you're going to see? Remember, you're going to have more outsourcing. You're going to have more tech and big data. You're going to have some learning analytics. It's already happened. So how are those hard trends? What would you all say? This is the dialogue part. What's it going to look like? And what do you think the faculty roles are going to look like? Active learning. Okay.
Rich, what do you think?
I was actually trying to think of the right word. I'm thinking also mentor is not the right word, but you know, I'll say what I think some of us struggle with, or maybe what some of our learners struggle with, especially our younger ones. I'm a PA, by the way. Is that the students, I think, struggle with understanding the role of a preceptor versus the role of a friend, and they think that well, they're not warm and fuzzy, so therefore I'm going to give them a bad, you know, I'm going to give the institution a bad review on my part. So I think we as educators need to find this balance of being an educator, but also letting them understand that that is our role. Our role is not to take that, you know, go have cocktails after work and hang out with them. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but I see that, you know, I'm just thinking about, and the only reason why I'm thinking about this is that I just read an article recently that a physician assistant student sued Quinnipiac University because of failing rotations. While the preceptors may not have been involved in the lawsuit, it did talk a lot the article did talk about the evaluation of the student from the preceptors, and I think students have to understand the objectivity that we need to provide as preceptors. So I'm not sure I really answered the question or
Interesting.
said anything.
But I think you're capturing it. You all have a role. I don't want to go to a PA or a physical therapist or a medical, or, you know, a physician or a nurse that hasn't been trained by people who are knowledgeable. We have a lot of folks who give advice. We have students giving other students advice, like on how to pass boards, how to like do residency stuff, who themselves haven't even done it yet. There is expertise you all have, and how to make that expertise viable and important and recognized, while also having that alliance and trust with the learner, but not necessarily their friend. That's an age-old tough one.
I was thinking also that do you think that educators should be becoming more and more moderators, because these people actually gather information on different sources, and it's wide open source now everywhere, and you just pointed at students teaching students and that kind of stuff. So I think in the future educators have to be more moderators than just leading a discussion, because these people bring to the table all sorts of information from all kinds of sources. And I think your role as an educator is to moderate, sort of, you know, moderate content, come up what's important, what's not important, because there'll be more and more clutter of weird information coming into the discussion.
So that content curator kind of role still, and
Right.
then facilitating, because they're good at using Dr. Google, unfortunately.
Yes. And sometimes I think over the years, you ask what's happened over the last 10 years, I noticed a lot of residents getting very, very good at gathering data, but they have a lot of troubles putting it together.
Yeah.
They are like sort of like fact finders quest perpetually.
Absolutely.
They have these phones at their hand, they can go in and out of different sources, but then they give you all this stuff and they don't seem to making a lot of sense of it. And maybe that's what your role as a teacher is, to find a map, how you get this fact to that fact and you make something out of it.
And some of us would argue that it's probably not fact to fact. It's what do you do with it? They are good at gathering information. They don't have the knowledge. They're not able to go up and make clinically evidence-based, clinically informed decisions. And somebody raised the question about anatomy. All those protocols and things that are going to be heuristics that are already driving your care, you need to be able to say, are those based on what data samples are those based on? And are they applicable to this population? Things you've always done when they read an article. But also, how do you, when the protocol isn't working, the decision making, the clinical expertise, that's what you all bring. And that's what you're really teaching them, is an approach for systematic thinking on their feet in a clinical setting. That's a unique skill.
I'm so impressed you mentioned that. I've seen residents bring into like a grand round guidelines and nothing more than guidelines, and they seem to be charmed because the guidelines seems to give them a easy map from 1 to 2 to 3.
Yeah.
But they don't want to go any further than that, and it's amazing these kind of
Yeah.
things that you say.
And if I'm looking at the chat right, Laura, I think you said it's the why that has been difficult for students. Which is, they're smart, they can memorize anything. But the why A connects to B and why it's not working. So getting into some of the sciences back, the basic sciences of why is it flowing this way? Why not that way? What's going on? And when it's multi-system, that's the expertise you all have. And it doesn't matter whether you're a PT, OT, or, RN, PA, that's the decision making and expertise that we need from you all. So the hard trends, let me just give you some hard trends that they said are going to influence. Outcomes-based payments, decrease money from the feds for GME, right? And just general. And shifting sites of care. They've kept the COVID thing in place. Private funding was their conclusion. I don't know about you all. We fund a number of our own GME positions because we've made the ROI argument. The other, they said, is there's going to be a decreased specialty choice. Because if that funding is going to come from private sources like healthcare systems or foundations, it's going to be for a healthcare workforce gap. Now, you can agree or disagree, but these are trends. And we see that in our system. That's what we get funded for positions. All the tech and big data are hard trends. Patient care and education is going to be increasingly provided by machines, meaning online, others outsourced. There are going to be new and discontinued medical specialties. So this, we didn't explore, we just stayed in the field of medicine. So think about radiology and how radiology has already had to pivot because of machines and doing readings of breast images. Simple example. And the incorporation of text, audio, and image files. So think about when your resident or someone meets with a patient. A lot of people already do the virtual visits. You record those. Those actually can be analyzed, and there are people doing already communication skill analysis with annotated feedback that is a machine that's being programmed. And it's very helpful. They've got great results, improving images. But suppose you had all that data about your residents, how they play with other people in a team meeting when you're not there. Interesting. Competency-based medical education. Again, the learner analytics, the dashboard, they predicted a true continuum of medical education. So the continuum from medical student to resident to CME to practitioner, right? That is going to be much truer. Think about the big report that just came out between the transitions from UME to GME. That was that coalition report that was just out. And that assessors, back to your question about, are you their friend? There may be many places, and the Canadians have been arguing this for years, that you got to separate the assessor from the teacher. It's hard to have a growth mindset and then be the person that tells them they're not doing that. That's hard on that relationship. Teaching and learning, more interactive game-based learning. That's where, again, outsourced publishers already have it, more simulation. This corporatization of education. These are the ones that the leaders across GME saw. Training linked to competency gaps. They're already doing that in CME where they have the data that your patient experience or your clinical outcomes are not good in hypertension for your patients who are X. Congratulations, you're going to take this module. So faculty competency-based medical educations, if you haven't done it already, they're looking for feedback on milestones for clinician educators and clinician researchers. ACGME is part of the group that has funded that, as has a number of other professional societies. And they think it's going to be linked to dollars. As one of our CFOs said, we're not going to pay people to be poor teachers. Show us the data. So that's the future. They also had some hopes. And the heart and humanity, the things you all were talking about. They hope that the charade of education being a core mission gets called out with only those truly committed and investing resources. These are their worries, that we will as a profession lose our identity and long-term relations with patients. And do we have the will and courage as educators to stand up? The trouble is we've done it as individuals. We haven't done it as groups. Our answer is yes. Academies like you are part of the solution. And this was what they said, is our focus as leaders must be driven by our social contract to educate a workforce. If not, then what are we doing? So that, as I said, we've taken you on a long journey. We started with the end in mind. And now we want you to think forward to infinity. We hope your academy pushes you. Try and think hard trends. You can be pretty darn accurate about the future. That's how people make money. And the job educator roles and how you can reframe your own role. So I think the alarm was almost on time. Time's up. But just want to remember, those of us in education, we do think it's a powerful tool and it can change the world. So congratulations to your academy. You all are fabulous and doing amazing things. And I hope to check in the future and see how you're progressing. And I can stay on if people have time, but no number of you have to run.
Deb, thank you so very much. Folks, if you're able to stay on, if there's any questions, go ahead and unmute and ask your question or chat in the chat box. And for those who need to sneak out, thanks for attending.
I have to go. I have some patience, but I think it was a wonderful talk and greatly appreciated.
Yeah, well,
Very educative.
You are very good at managing technology and driving.
That's a COVID outcome. Yes, you're absolutely right. Thank you again.
Yep.
Bye, Ray. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great talk. Thank you.
Sure. Mary, you could speak versus typing if you're in a, I know sometimes you're not in a spot to do that. And I think, Beth, I think the articles are all available. They're all open source. So if you need any of them to go back or share with people, that's fine.
That's great. Thanks so much. Well, you've given us many things to think about, and thank you so much for being a part of our teaching academy and inspiring our growth and evolution. And it's been really a fascinating hour, and I know we could spend a lot more time talking and thinking about things, but thank you again for being here And what
Sure.
a wonderful presentation. We're super grateful to have had you
Well, and at some
join
point,
us.
if we can, we'll try and figure out a way to get you and Beth to come and convince our or Beth, you and
Yes.
Robin to come and convince our folks that one can pull it off, and find a person that will help fund it to get it started.
That sounds great. We would be delighted to share our experience. So
All right.
wonderful. Well, thanks again, everyone. Check back next month for our next Lunch and Learn sponsored by the Teaching Academy. And thank you again to Dr. Deb Simpson for being here today. Have a great rest of the week, everyone.